The Space Shuttle mission NASA hid from the world. In 1988, the Space Shuttle Atlantis returned to Earth with severe damage. Over 700 heat shield tiles compromised. NASA classified the mission, sealed the records, and refused to release photos for decades. What were they hiding? The blackened hull of Atlantis told a tale of near-catastrophe. Scorch marks and missing tiles created a terrifying mosaic of what could have been one of NASA's darkest days. Why did officials respond with such secrecy? Today we reveal the true story of STS-27, the military reconnaissance mission that almost ended in tragedy, and the real reasons this harrowing chapter in space exploration remained hidden from public view for over 30 years. The mysterious return of Atlantis. What if I told you that one of NASA's most dangerous missions was deliberately hidden from public view for decades? December 2nd, 1988. Space Shuttle Atlantis thundered into the sky on what appeared to be a routine mission. 5 days later, on December 7th, the orbiter touched down at Edwards Air Force Base in California. But something was different about this landing. The usual throng of media was notably absent. No live television coverage broadcasted the shuttle's return. It was as if NASA wanted no one to see Atlantis. The reason became clear when ground crews approached the spacecraft. What they discovered sent shockwaves through NASA's ranks. Atlantis had suffered catastrophic damage to its thermal protection system. More than 700 heat shield tiles were damaged or completely missing, an unprecedented level of destruction never before seen on any shuttle mission. Like a protective armor with critical pieces ripped away, the shuttle's vulnerable underbelly had been exposed. One particularly concerning area had exposed the aluminum airframe directly to the searing heat of reentry, where temperatures can reach over 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. We were lucky to get home. Commander Robert Gibson would later recall, after declassification allowed him to speak about the mission. The crew had known about some damage, but couldn't assess its severity while in orbit. When they finally saw the condition of their spacecraft after landing, they were stunned. Mission specialist Mike Mullane would later write that the damage was so severe, it was amazing we made it back. Within hours of landing, NASA security teams cordoned off the shuttle. Engineers examining the damage were sworn to secrecy. Every photograph taken of the damaged tiles was immediately classified. NASA's photography team, typically allowed to document the shuttle's condition, found themselves restricted from normal access points. Those who did see the damage were explicitly forbidden from discussing it outside secure facilities. When reporters inquired about Atlantis' condition, NASA provided a carefully crafted statement. According to the official explanation, STS-27 had been a successful routine mission with minor anomalies during reentry. Those minor anomalies had nearly resulted in the deaths of 5 astronauts and the loss of a billion-dollar spacecraft. The standard post-mission debriefings were conducted behind closed doors with additional security protocols. Even within NASA, information about the mission was strictly compartmentalized, a need-to-know basis that left many agency employees in the dark about what had truly transpired. This level of secrecy was unusual even for NASA, an organization accustomed to managing sensitive information. The agency had weathered public disasters before, most notably the Challenger explosion just 2 years earlier in 1986. That tragedy had been broadcast live to millions of viewers, forcing NASA to conduct its accident investigation in full public view, facing difficult questions about its decision-making and safety culture. So why handle STS-27 differently? If Atlantis had nearly suffered catastrophic failure, wouldn't transparency about the close call help improve safety procedures? NASA's public mission had always emphasized openness and civilian scientific advancement. Yet here was evidence of something else, a mission so sensitive that even a near disaster had to be hidden. As the damaged shuttle was quietly repaired, engineers who inspected Atlantis calculated that the orbiter had come perilously close to breaking up during reentry. The missing tile that exposed the aluminum frame was located in one of the most vulnerable areas of the heat shield. Only a fortunate coincidence had saved the spacecraft. A steel mounting plate happened to be positioned directly beneath that critical spot, providing just enough thermal protection to prevent a burn-through. Had that steel plate not been there, Atlantis would have suffered the same fate that Columbia would experience 15 years later in 2003, when damage to its thermal protection system led to the orbiter breaking apart during reentry, killing all 7 astronauts aboard. The parallels are chilling. Except Columbia's tragedy unfolded on live television, while Atlantis' near-miss remained classified for decades. Years passed before the truth began to emerge in fragments. Former crew members occasionally made vague references to close calls during interviews. Aviation publications printed rumors of significant damage. But comprehensive details remained locked away in classified files, unavailable for public or scientific scrutiny. It wasn't until nearly 30 years later, when declassification finally allowed the full story to be told, that the public learned just how close Atlantis had come to disaster. The images of the damaged shuttle, when finally released, showed a spacecraft that looked like it had flown through a hailstorm of bullets, hundreds of gouges, chips, and missing tiles covering its black and white surface. The revelation fundamentally challenges our understanding of the Space Shuttle program. While presented to the public as a civilian scientific endeavor, many shuttle missions served primarily military and intelligence objectives. What few outside the classified program knew was that Atlantis had successfully deployed a sophisticated reconnaissance satellite into orbit, codenamed ONYX, with capabilities so advanced and a mission so vital to national security that protecting its secrets took precedence over normal safety protocols and public disclosure requirements. STS-27 wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a pattern of classified operations hidden behind NASA's public image. The Pentagon's Space Shuttle, the extraordinary secrecy surrounding missions like STS-27 reveals a fundamental truth about the entire Space Shuttle program. From its very inception, the Space Shuttle carried dual citizenship in both civilian and military domains. What millions watched during those iconic launches was often a cleverly disguised military operation. Few Americans realized that the Space Shuttle's distinctive delta wing design and massive cargo bay weren't created to maximize scientific potential. These features were direct results of Pentagon requirements. When NASA began conceptualizing a reusable spacecraft in the early 1970s, the Department of Defense saw an opportunity to advance its own space capabilities and quickly became deeply involved in the program's development. This partnership fundamentally shaped the entire Space Shuttle program. The Pentagon provided critical funding and technical support, but this financial backing came with significant strings attached. Military planners insisted on specific design requirements that would accommodate their classified payloads. The shuttle's massive 60 by 15-foot cargo bay, large enough to fit an entire city bus, was sized precisely to carry the military's reconnaissance satellites into orbit. Like a custom suit tailored to conceal a weapon, the shuttle's external design masked its internal military capabilities. The cross-shaped arrangement of the main engines, the shuttle's orbital maneuvering capabilities, and even its thermal protection system were all influenced by military requirements. These design elements were mandates that NASA had to incorporate to secure funding for the program. The result was a spacecraft serving both the public-facing NASA and the shadow presence of the Department of Defense. This arrangement created an unusual dynamic within the Space Shuttle program. While NASA maintained operational control of the vehicles, the Department of Defense retained authority over missions carrying military payloads. These classified operations were identified by the same STS designation as civilian missions, but operated under vastly different protocols regarding information disclosure and security. The military's investment warranted its own dedicated launch facility. At Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, the Pentagon constructed a specialized launch complex designed specifically for Space Shuttle missions carrying classified military payloads. This facility enabled launches into polar orbits, trajectories passing over Earth's poles rather than following the equatorial path used for most civilian missions. Polar orbits were particularly valuable for military reconnaissance because they allow satellites to eventually pass over every point on Earth's surface as the planet rotates beneath them. This made them ideal for comprehensive surveillance of adversary territories, especially Soviet military installations. The Vandenberg launch site represented a massive investment in infrastructure specifically supporting military space espionage capabilities. Although the Challenger disaster in 1986 prevented the Vandenberg facility from fulfilling its intended purpose, its construction demonstrates the Pentagon's deep commitment to utilizing the space shuttle for military objectives. The Department of Defense had planned numerous classified missions from this location, all designed to deploy assets, enhancing America's intelligence gathering capabilities during the Cold War. Behind the scenes, the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, played a pivotal role in planning and executing these classified space operations. The very existence of the NRO was itself classified until the early 1990s, creating a situation where one of the primary users of the Space Shuttle program couldn't be publicly acknowledged. This secrecy extended to the purposes and capabilities of the payloads being deployed during military shuttle missions. The NRO worked closely with NASA to ensure that the shuttle could meet the specific needs of the intelligence community. This collaboration was essential for integrating sophisticated reconnaissance satellites into the shuttle's cargo bay and deploying them precisely into their designated orbits. The technical requirements for these deployments were extraordinarily complex, requiring specialized training for the astronaut crews involved. This arrangement created a unique dynamic where NASA astronauts, publicly celebrated as scientific explorers, were actually conducting military intelligence operations that couldn't be disclosed to the public. Crew members on classified missions underwent additional security clearances and specialized training beyond what was required for standard scientific missions. The Space Shuttle program became an icon of American ingenuity and scientific advancement, inspiring generations of children to pursue careers in science and engineering. Yet behind this inspirational facade, many shuttle missions were executing military objectives that advanced America's strategic position in the Cold War space race. For classified missions, the Department of Defense maintained significant operational control over mission parameters, communications protocols, and information disclosure. NASA effectively became a service provider, operating the spacecraft while the Pentagon directed the mission objectives and controlled what information reached the public. This partnership proved particularly valuable during the height of the Cold War. While the Soviet Union could track shuttle launches and landings, the classified nature of many missions prevented them from determining exactly what capabilities the United States was deploying in orbit. This information advantage allowed the U.S. to maintain technological superiority in space-based intelligence gathering. By the time STS-27 launched in 1988, these classified military shuttle missions had become a well-established component of America's space operations. What made STS-27 unique wasn't its classified nature, but rather the extraordinary danger the crew would face due to the damage sustained during launch. Mission STS-27, the official cover story. As Commander Robert Hoot Gibson prepared to lead Atlantis into orbit, he carried the weight of the mission so classified that even severe damage to the shuttle would be discussed only through encrypted channels. The 5 astronauts of STS-27 were about to embark on a journey that officially didn't exist, at least not in the way NASA described it to the American public. NASA's public portrayal of STS-27 concealed all meaningful details, referring to it simply as a Department of Defense mission. This designation deflected questions while signaling to journalists that probing further would be futile. The agency's communications focused exclusively on surface-level details, crew assignments, launch schedules, and basic flight parameters, carefully omitting any reference to the actual objectives. By limiting public discourse to generalities, NASA acknowledged the mission's existence while revealing nothing of its purpose. Media inquiries about the payload were met with practiced non-answers from public affairs officers who themselves had limited access to the mission's true nature. Launch preparations reflected this extraordinary secrecy. STS-27's exact departure time remained classified until just 24 hours before liftoff, giving potential adversaries minimal opportunity to position intelligence assets that might observe the classified payload during deployment. The December 1st, 1988 launch date arrived with unacceptable conditions. Cloud cover and strong winds forced controllers to scrub the attempt. Weather improved the following day, and Atlantis finally cleared Pad 39B to begin what NASA characterized as a routine operation. Yet everything about this mission was exceptional. Commander Gibson and his crew, pilot Guy Gardner and mission specialists Richard Mullane, Jerry Ross, and William Shepard, underwent specialized preparation beyond standard training. Their pre-flight regimen included extensive security briefings and military protocols for handling classified aspects. Each crew member understood that virtually everything they would do in orbit would remain undisclosed, even to their families, creating a profound sense of isolation in their service. The launch site transformed with unusual security measures. Military personnel maintained a visible presence throughout Kennedy Space Center, with restricted areas expanding beyond normal perimeters. Access to certain facilities required special clearances, creating a parallel operation for thousands of NASA employees who supported the launch without knowing its purpose. The Air Force's influence pervaded mission planning and execution. Military personnel occupied positions within mission control, typically staffed by NASA specialists. These Department of Defense representatives ensured communications about certain aspects remained secured and compartmentalized even within NASA's operations. For Gibson, the mission presented unique challenges beyond technical spaceflight requirements. The crew was instructed to use encrypted methods for all sensitive communications, including images showing damage to the orbiter. This requirement became consequential when poor quality images failed to convey the severity of Atlantis' heat shield damage. Gibson felt the crushing weight of this knowledge, certain they faced potentially catastrophic damage while unable to effectively communicate this reality through the mandated secure channels. Gibson's frustration became evident as he recounted his certainty about Atlantis' severe damage, contrasted with ground controllers' optimistic assessment based on degraded imagery. His crew carried the psychological burden of classified knowledge they couldn't share, operating a damaged spacecraft they couldn't fully inspect, while communicating through protocols that prioritized secrecy over clarity. While the public received sanitized information about a routine deployment, Gibson later revealed that after initial deployment, the crew re-rendezvoused with the satellite and assisted with fixing it before separating again. A complex operation demonstrating their mission was active satellite servicing rather than simple deployment. This gulf between public narrative and operational reality shows how NASA transformed truth into constructed fiction when national security demanded. The communication strategy provided media just enough information to file stories without revealing anything meaningful about actual operations. For the astronauts' families, secrecy created additional strains. Unlike crews on scientific missions, STS-27's astronauts maintained silence about their activities even in private conversations. Personal communications from orbit were monitored and restricted to prevent inadvertent disclosure of classified information. Behind this elaborate secrecy lay a mission of extraordinary strategic importance. The payload represented cutting-edge reconnaissance technology developed at enormous expense. From the Pentagon's perspective, operational security measures weren't excessive, but necessary to protect both the technology and conceal its capabilities from Soviet intelligence. NASA's acceptance of these security measures reveals how deeply the agency had become intertwined with national defense objectives. Despite its public image as a civilian scientific organization, NASA regularly subordinated operational transparency to military requirements during classified missions. What makes STS-27 remarkable isn't merely the secrecy surrounding its purpose, but how that secrecy extended to dangers facing the crew. When Atlantis sustained damage during launch, the classified nature influenced every aspect of the response. Information about the shuttle's condition was handled through the same restricted channels as details about the payload, creating a dangerous situation where operational security potentially compromised flight safety. ONYX, the secret payload. The risks taken on STS-27 raise a fundamental question. What treasure was Atlantis carrying that warranted endangering a billion-dollar spacecraft and its crew? The answer lies in a technological marvel codenamed ONYX, a satellite with capabilities so advanced that most details remain classified decades later. Behind the vague designation of a Department of Defense payload lay one of America's most sophisticated intelligence-gathering instruments ever placed in orbit. ONYX, also known within intelligence circles as LaCrosse, represented the cutting edge of the Keyhole Reconnaissance Satellite program, specifically a third-generation KH-11 spy satellite. This marked a revolutionary advance in America's ability to monitor adversaries from space. What made ONYX extraordinary was its digital imaging technology that could transmit photographs back to Earth in near real time. This technological leap eliminated the dangerous and complicated film return capsules that previous generations relied upon. Intelligence analysts could receive critical information almost immediately after capture, rather than waiting days or weeks. According to declassified information, the resolution quality was so exceptional that KH-11 satellites could clearly photograph something as small as a license plate from hundreds of miles above Earth, allowing American intelligence to track Soviet missile deployments and troop movements with remarkable accuracy. ONYX wasn't built by NASA, but constructed through a partnership between Lockheed Martin, the National Reconnaissance Office, INRO, and the Central Intelligence Agency. This collaboration fused America's most advanced aerospace engineering with its most secretive intelligence requirements. The satellite's development costs likely ran into billions, reflecting both its technological sophistication and strategic importance. The system's primary advantage came from its synthetic aperture radar, SAR, technology, which enabled the satellite to see through cloud cover and even penetrate soil under certain conditions. This capability eliminated a major limitation of traditional optical reconnaissance, dependency on clear weather. Soviet military planners could no longer rely on cloud cover to hide their activities from American eyes. The transmission system was equally impressive. Early KH-11 satellites utilized the tracking and data relay satellite system to transmit imagery to a ground station at White Sands, New Mexico. This satellite-to-satellite communication reduced the time between image capture and analysis by eliminating the need to wait until passing over American territory. The physical dimensions of ONYX explain why the space shuttle was essential for deployment. Its size and weight exceeded the carrying capacity of conventional expendable rockets available then. Although exact dimensions remain classified, it likely approached the maximum capacity of Atlantis' 60 by 15-foot cargo bay. Only the shuttle could deliver such an enormous payload to the specific orbit required. Timing was crucial for the ONYX deployment. By 1988, the Cold War was entering its final years, though few could predict the Soviet Union's imminent collapse. The satellite provided vital insights into Soviet activities during this period of historical uncertainty. Its orbit was carefully calculated to maximize surveillance coverage of Soviet territory, following patterns optimized for intelligence gathering rather than the geosynchronous orbits used by civilian satellites. ONYX significantly advanced American reconnaissance capabilities. Previous systems like the KH-9 Hexagon Big Bird carried 60 miles of photographic film with twin optical cameras that intelligence officials described as mowing the lawn. Though impressive with resolution capabilities of about 2 to 3 feet, this system relied on physical film returns. After release from Atlantis' cargo bay, ONYX faced a critical challenge when its massive antenna failed to properly deploy. This antenna was essential for radar imaging and communications. Without it, the billion-dollar asset would be severely compromised or rendered useless. The crew confronted a difficult choice: abort the primary mission or attempt a dangerous repair. Using the shuttle's robotic arm, the astronauts performed a delicate operation under extreme time pressure to assist with the antenna deployment. The success of this repair determined whether America would gain a crucial intelligence advantage in the ongoing Cold War. The digital imaging technologies pioneered in ONYX eventually transformed civilian life. The same principles that enabled high-resolution digital imaging from space contributed to today's consumer technology. Modern smartphone cameras, with their sophisticated digital imaging sensors and instant transmission capabilities, represent the commercial evolution of innovations first developed for reconnaissance satellites like ONYX. Even today, many specific capabilities of ONYX remain classified. While general information about the KH-11 program has been released, technical specifications and operational parameters continue to be protected. This ongoing secrecy, decades after deployment, suggests elements of the technology remain relevant to current. 84 seconds after launch, disaster strikes. While ONYX represented the pinnacle of American intelligence technology, the mission carrying this classified payload was about to face a threat no satellite could detect. Just 85 seconds after what appeared to be a perfect launch, a seemingly insignificant piece of ablative insulating material from the right-hand solid rocket booster nose cap broke away, transforming STS-27 from a routine deployment into one of NASA's closest brushes with catastrophe. Atlantis launched on December 2nd, 1988, with Commander Robert "Hoot" Gibson and his crew reaching orbit within 9 minutes of liftoff. They remained unaware that during ascent, a small fragment of insulation had become a silent adversary, striking the orbiter's thermal protection system with devastating force. Like a bullet fired in slow motion, this debris had already set in motion a potentially catastrophic chain of events. The first warning signs appeared when the crew observed unusual white streaks along the shuttle's fuselage. These visual markers indicated that the outer black coating of the thermal protection tiles had been stripped away by impacts. The white coloration revealed the exposed tile material beneath, evidence that protective layers had been compromised. The crew couldn't yet determine the full extent of this damage, which stretched across a significant portion of the orbiter's underside. In space, inspecting external damage presented formidable challenges. The crew relied on the shuttle's robotic arm with its mounted camera as their primary assessment tool. Commander Gibson methodically maneuvered this mechanical appendage to capture images of the concerning areas, particularly focusing on the white streaks they had observed. The process was painstaking and limited by technical constraints. The robotic arm couldn't reach all areas of the shuttle, leaving some damage zones impossible to inspect. For the areas they could photograph, the camera provided their only window into understanding the potential danger they faced during reentry. Each image represented vital data in an equation that would determine their survival. The classified nature of the mission created an additional complication that threatened their safety. Communications between the shuttle and mission control required encryption due to the sensitive military payload. This security requirement degraded the image quality being transmitted back to Earth. When the damage assessment photos arrived at Johnson Space Center, flight controllers viewed only grainy, low-resolution images that masked the true severity. This communication barrier created a dangerous disconnect between the crew's perception and mission control's understanding. While astronauts could clearly see concerning damage from their windows, the encryption process reduced these danger signs to ambiguous, pixelated data by the time they reached engineers on the ground. The misinterpretation had profound consequences. Viewing only degraded photos, flight controllers believed the damage wasn't severe. The encryption had obscured the true danger, leading ground personnel to dismiss some crew concerns as excessive caution. This miscommunication represented a critical failure point, one not fully understood until after Atlantis had returned. The damage was catastrophic in scope. The shuttle's thermal protection system had sustained hits to over 700 individual tiles. The pattern extended from behind the nose cap along the entire belly of the spacecraft, stopping just short of the wing leading edges. The rudder speed brake had been repeatedly struck, and the orbital maneuvering system pods suffered 14 separate impacts. Most critically, one tile was completely missing, exposing the aluminum frame beneath to the extreme temperatures of reentry. This level of damage placed Atlantis in a situation comparable to what would later doom Columbia in 2003. The critical difference, what ultimately saved Atlantis and her crew, was the placement of the most severe damage. The missing tile happened to be situated above a steel mounting plate, providing just enough additional thermal protection to prevent a catastrophic burn-through. Throughout this crisis, the classified mission constrained complicated matters at every turn. The crew couldn't openly discuss specific aspects of their situation. Security protocols prevented clear communication of the danger. The pressure to complete the primary military objective remained despite the apparent damage to their vehicle. The crew faced an impossible dilemma. They had deployed a billion-dollar reconnaissance satellite crucial to national security, but now faced the possibility that their return journey might end in disaster. Each new image they captured added to their concern, yet the encrypted transmission system continued to filter out the severity when those images reached mission control. This divergence in risk assessment placed tremendous pressure on the astronauts. They harbored serious doubts about their shuttle's ability to withstand reentry while receiving assurances from mission control that the situation was manageable. This disconnect would later be recognized as a critical failure in NASA's risk management process for classified missions. The extent of damage to Atlantis' thermal protection system remained unknown to the public for years, with all imagery and assessment reports immediately restricted due to the classified status. The deployment crisis. While Atlantis sustained catastrophic damage during launch, the classified ONYX satellite faced its own existential threat once in orbit. What happens when a reconnaissance satellite worth billions can't deploy its most critical component, and the only people who can fix it are aboard a fatally wounded spacecraft? The deployment of the ONYX satellite represented the primary objective of the STS-27 mission, a sophisticated reconnaissance asset destined to monitor Soviet activities from above. Despite their knowledge of the shuttle's compromised thermal protection system, Commander Gibson and his crew had to proceed with their classified directive. The stark reality, a damaged orbiter carrying irreplaceable human lives, was now responsible for delivering a billion-dollar intelligence asset crucial to national security. The deployment sequence began with the remote manipulator system, the shuttle's robotic arm. This precision instrument grappled the massive satellite from the payload bay, where it had remained protected during launch. With methodical precision, the RMS lifted ONYX from its cradle, a delicate operation requiring perfect execution despite the crew's knowledge of their compromised return vehicle. The robotic arm maneuvered the satellite into its deployment attitude as the crew monitored dozens of parameters. The satellite's orientation had to be exact, specifically aligned to ensure that once released, ONYX would follow its programmed sequence to unfurl solar arrays, extend antennas, and begin surveillance. The robotic arm released its grip, and ONYX drifted away from Atlantis. Initially, everything appeared nominal. The solar arrays extended properly, power systems came online, and initial telemetry showed functioning systems. Then disaster struck. One of the satellite's critical antenna dishes, essential for transmitting intelligence data back to Earth, failed to deploy completely. The dish remained partially folded, stuck in an intermediate position that rendered it unusable. Without this component, ONYX would be effectively blind and mute, an orbital paperweight carrying state secrets but unable to share them. Mission Control, communicating through secure military channels, confirmed the crew's suspicions. The antenna deployment mechanism had malfunctioned. Now they faced an impossible choice: abandon the billion-dollar asset or attempt a high-risk repair operation that had never been rehearsed. Imagine attempting to perform delicate surgery with a 50-foot mechanical arm. while traveling 17,500 miles per hour on a billion-dollar patient you can't directly touch, all while knowing your ride home has sustained potentially fatal damage. This was precisely the situation facing Gibson and his crew. After tense discussions with ground controllers, the decision was made to salvage the satellite. This meant executing an unplanned rendezvous maneuver to bring Atlantis back into proximity with the drifting ONYX. Pilot Guy Gardner executed a series of precise burns, carefully adjusting the shuttle's orbit to intercept the satellite without risking collision. The high-inclination orbit, tilted 57 degrees to the equator, made the rendezvous maneuver more challenging, requiring additional fuel consumption and precise calculations. Once Atlantis positioned alongside the malfunctioning satellite, the crew redeployed the remote manipulator system for a very different purpose than initially planned. Commander Gibson later described this operation as the mechanical equivalent of brain surgery in space. The astronauts worked methodically, coordinating with encryption-protected guidance from specialists on the ground. Each movement of the robotic arm could either save or destroy the billion-dollar asset. After several tense hours of careful manipulation, the antenna finally broke free and deployed fully. The satellite's telemetry immediately showed improved signal strength. ONYX was now operational, ready to begin its classified mission monitoring Soviet activities. The crew still needed to ensure the satellite reached its final operational orbit. With ONYX functioning properly, they executed the final separation sequence and watched as it drifted away, gradually activating its own propulsion systems. Ground controllers confirmed the satellite had achieved its intended orbit, an intelligence asset now positioned to observe areas of strategic interest. This success came at a cost. The unplanned repair operations had consumed valuable resources and extended the mission timeline, forcing the crew to remain in orbit longer with a critically damaged spacecraft. Each additional day increased the psychological burden on the astronauts, acutely aware of the compromised thermal protection system that would soon face the extreme temperatures of reentry. The classified nature of the mission created additional complications. The crew used encrypted military channels for all satellite communications, adding another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. The pressure to complete this military objective, despite the damaged spacecraft, reflected the mission's strategic importance. By the time ONYX reached its operational orbit, the crew of STS-27 had accomplished something extraordinary, salvaging a crucial intelligence asset while operating a critically damaged spacecraft under conditions of absolute secrecy. Their ingenuity had preserved a billion-dollar investment and ensured the continuation of vital reconnaissance capabilities during the final years of the Cold War. The life-or-death decision. After successfully deploying their classified payload, the crew of STS-27 faced a stark reality. The same secrecy protocols that protected their mission now threatened their safe return. The encryption systems that safeguarded their communications were degrading the very images that might save their lives. How do you convince mission control your spacecraft is mortally wounded when the very process of sending that warning corrupts the evidence? The images that Commander Gibson and his crew had captured of Atlantis' damaged underbelly arrived at Johnson Space Center as grainy, pixelated approximations due to military encryption channels, a requirement for this classified mission. The degraded quality sparked an extraordinary conflict between the shuttle crew in orbit and the engineers on the ground. When Mission Control reviewed these low-resolution images, their assessment was shockingly dismissive. Rather than seeing evidence of catastrophic damage, they saw what appeared to be minor irregularities, perhaps just shadows or lighting artifacts. To the frustration of the astronauts, flight controllers actually suggested that the crew was misinterpreting what they were seeing. Just lights and shadows. That was the assessment that came back to the stunned crew. The security protocols designed to protect the mission's secrecy were now potentially endangering their lives by preventing a proper assessment of their predicament. Commander Gibson stared at the tiles he knew were missing. then at the response from Mission Control. In that moment, a chilling thought crossed his mind. They've made their decision based on fuzzy pictures, while I'm looking at the actual damage that could kill us all. His frustration boiled over in a darkly humorous comment to his fellow astronauts. No use dying all tensed up, he told them, suggesting they should try to enjoy their remaining days in orbit. This gallows humor masked his genuine belief they might not survive reentry. Behind the scenes at Johnson Space Center, emergency meetings convened. Despite the initial dismissal, some engineers began to recognize that at least one critical area had indeed lost a complete tile, a spot where the aluminum airframe was now directly exposed to what would become the inferno of reentry. This realization triggered intense debate about how to proceed. Three options emerged. Attempt emergency repairs during a spacewalk. Impractical given the extensive damage. Launch a rescue mission with another shuttle, requiring an unprecedented breach of classified mission protocols. Or proceed with reentry as planned, gambling that the thermal protection system would hold together long enough for Atlantis to return safely. The rescue mission option was particularly dramatic. It would require rapid preparation of another orbiter, launching within Atlantis' orbital lifetime, and conducting an unprecedented crew transfer in space. Most significantly, it meant publicly admitting a classified military mission was in jeopardy, violating the very security protocols the mission operated under. As these discussions unfolded, a troubling pattern emerged. Despite Commander Gibson's first-hand testimony about the severity of the damage, some engineers continued to downplay his concerns. This dynamic, where observations of astronauts in orbit were questioned by technical teams on the ground, created a dangerous precedent that would later be identified as a contributing factor in the Columbia disaster investigation. While NASA had contingency plans for astronaut rescue during military missions, implementing them would require breaching operational security. The classified nature had created a catch-22. Saving the crew might require revealing the very secrets the mission was designed to protect. After intensive debate, the final decision was made. Atlantis would attempt reentry as scheduled. This judgment rested on several technical assessments, including the critical realization that the missing tile was located above a steel mounting plate used for payload attachments. Engineers believed this steel plate would provide sufficient thermal protection to prevent a burn-through during reentry. This decision placed an extraordinary psychological burden on the crew. They were left to prepare for reentry knowing their concerns had been initially dismissed and that they were now committed to a course of action that many believed might be fatal. Commander Gibson's comment about enjoying their remaining days reflected a genuine belief that their chances of survival were questionable at best. For the crew, the frustration was compounded by the mission's classified status. They couldn't communicate freely about their predicament, as every transmission had to maintain operational security. The very secrecy that defined their mission constrained their ability to advocate for their own safety. Mission Control's final communication represented a calculated risk assessment. After reviewing all available data, engineers determined that while the damage was significant, it was survivable. This assessment was delivered with confidence, but behind that confidence lay significant uncertainty. The astronauts prepared for reentry with a mixture of professionalism and dread. They had completed their primary mission objective, deploying the billion-dollar ONYX reconnaissance satellite. But that accomplishment would mean little if they couldn't return safely to Earth. As they configured Atlantis for descent, they knew they were about to test the limits of the shuttle's design and their own mortality. This decision to proceed with reentry despite severe damage represented one of the most controversial moments in shuttle program history. It pitted the immediate safety of the crew against the requirements of national security during a critical period of the Cold War. Fiery reentry, 30 minutes of terror. The gap between theory and reality never loomed larger than in those 30 minutes of atmospheric reentry. While Mission Control had deemed the damage survivable based on grainy images, The crew of Atlantis felt every unusual vibration and heard every unexpected sound as their damaged spacecraft transformed into a fireball hurtling toward Earth at 5 times the speed of sound. As December 6th, 1988 dawned, the crew of Atlantis faced their moment of truth. Commander Robert "Hoot" Gibson gathered his team for what might have been their final briefing. The gravity of their situation was unmistakable. Their spacecraft's thermal protection system had sustained unprecedented damage, and their lives now hung in the balance of physics, material science, and perhaps a measure of luck that no mission should ever require. No use dying, all tensed up, Gibson told his crew as they prepared for descent, his gallows humor masking the deadly serious reality they faced. This tactical decision aimed to maintain crew composure during what might be their final hours. Gibson understood that panic would serve no purpose as they committed to the irreversible process of atmospheric reentry. The procedure ahead was daunting. The hour-long hypersonic descent would transform the shuttle's kinetic energy into heat through friction with the increasingly dense atmosphere, like a meteor forced to surrender its velocity in a violent negotiation with Earth's air. The thermal protection system, now compromised with that one critically missing tile, would face temperatures that could melt aluminum and weaken the spacecraft structure to the point of catastrophic failure. Gibson and his crew suited up and strapped into their seats with a unique awareness. They were knowingly piloting a damaged spacecraft through conditions that might destroy it. No contingency plans remained. No backup options existed. No mechanism to abort once the deorbit burn completed. Their destiny sealed the moment Atlantis began its fall from orbit. The descent profile took Atlantis first across the Indian Ocean, then Australia, and finally across the vast Pacific. As the shuttle dropped from 200 miles altitude, friction created the characteristic plasma sheath that eventually enveloped the entire vehicle. For the crew inside, an eerie orange glow appeared through the flight deck windows. Beautiful, but harboring potential destruction. The reentry became particularly terrifying because the crew couldn't access critical information. The instruments showed nothing about the orbiter's skin temperature, leaving them reliant on mission control for updates. Each crackle of communication carried the weight of potential disaster. As they plunged deeper, the crew sensed differences from previous missions. Unusual vibrations transmitted through the shuttle's frame. New sounds, never before experienced, added to the cockpit tension as plasma temperatures outside climbed past 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The roller coaster had begun its descent, but the track ahead remained invisible. Commander Gibson focused intently on a single instrument that might provide the first warning of catastrophic failure, the gauge showing deflection levels in the elevons on Atlantis wings. These control surfaces would reveal any asymmetric forces acting on the shuttle due to the damaged tiles. If one side experienced more drag than the other, it would manifest as an elevon split. Gibson knew the critical threshold. An elevon split exceeding 1/4 of a degree meant Atlantis was being torn apart. In that scenario, the crew would have approximately 60 seconds before structural failure, their only opportunity to communicate their final assessment. Meanwhile, the missing tile location faced the full brunt of reentry heat. The exposed aluminum frame beneath would normally melt under such conditions. What the crew didn't know was that this particular area had an unexpected safeguard. The tile was missing directly above a steel plate forming part of the payload attachment point. This steel component, more heat-resistant than the surrounding aluminum, absorbed and distributed the thermal energy that would otherwise have burned through the spacecraft's skin. This coincidental placement of the mounting hardware for the L-band antenna now prevented a catastrophic burn-through similar to what would later doom Columbia in 2003. Each passing minute without system failures provided hope. The crew monitored their instruments intently, ready to respond to any sign of compromise. The shuttle's automated systems compensated for the altered aerodynamics, but the margins remained dangerously thin. At approximately 100,000 feet, the spacecraft had weathered the most intense heating phase. The plasma sheath began to dissipate as Atlantis slowed to below Mach 3. The steel plate had held, preventing the burn-through that would have spelled doom. Gibson's attention never wavered from the Elevon indicators until Atlantis had slowed to subsonic speeds. Only then did he acknowledge what seemed increasingly likely: they would survive. The approach and landing carried extra weight as the crew guided their wounded spacecraft toward Edwards Air Force Base. The landing itself was uneventful, a testament to the crew's professionalism under extraordinary pressure. As wheels touched dry lake bed, the 5 astronauts completed one of the most harrowing returns in spaceflight history, though the public would remain unaware for years due to the mission's classified status. The post-landing inspection revealed the aluminum structure surrounding the steel plate had begun to heat dangerously, approaching failure point. The margin between survival and disaster had been measured in mere degrees of temperature and seconds of exposure. The crew had survived a reentry profile that the classified aftermath. Atlantis survived by the narrowest margins, but the true story of what happened that day would remain buried in classified files for almost 30 years. The damage was so severe that veteran NASA engineers who inspected the shuttle after landing could scarcely believe the crew had made it back alive. Yet instead of becoming a celebrated survival story, STS-27's brush with catastrophe vanished into the classified shadows of the American space program. When Atlantis rolled to a stop at Edwards Air Force Base, engineers approached the spacecraft and were met with a shocking sight. The thermal protection system had sustained unprecedented damage. Entire sections of tiles missing, others hanging precariously, and most alarmingly, an exposed section of the orbiter's aluminum airframe in a critical area. This was precisely the vulnerability that could trigger catastrophic failure during reentry. The inspection team's photographs and reports vanished immediately into secure government facilities. Unlike standard missions where damage assessments would be discussed openly, every STS-27 document was stamped classified and restricted from public view. The damage pattern told a sobering story. The compromised thermal protection system extended from beyond the reinforced carbon-carbon nose cap along the entire belly of the spacecraft, stopping just short of the wing leading edges, the very area that would later prove fatal for Columbia in 2003. The aft maneuvering pods showed 14 separate impacts, with the starboard rudder speed brake repeatedly struck by debris. Standing before the damaged orbiter, astronauts, engineers, and NASA Administrator Jim Fletcher recognized a sobering truth. As one engineer later remarked, the Gibson crew had cheated death by a hair's breadth. What saved Atlantis was a steel plate, not designed as thermal protection, but merely an attachment point for payload bay equipment that happened to be positioned perfectly to prevent burn-through of the aluminum frame. NASA established a thermal protection system damage review team chaired by John Thomas and Jay Honeycutt, with astronaut Don McMonagle serving on its panel. Their investigation traced the root cause to a seemingly minor modification in the manufacturing process of materials used in the solid rocket boosters. This discovery embodied what Gibson's crew would later describe as the primary maxim of engineering: better is the enemy of good enough. The investigation concluded in early 1989, but findings remained hidden within classified channels. Repairs to Atlantis required replacing hundreds of thermal protection tiles and carefully examining the exposed aluminum structure for heat damage. This work proceeded behind closed doors, with specialized technicians working under security protocols typically reserved for military aircraft maintenance. The classification created a dangerous information gap within NASA itself. Engineers implemented new inspection protocols and modified pre-launch procedures across the shuttle fleet without revealing the incident that necessitated them. Critical safety knowledge existed, but couldn't be fully shared within the engineering community. Secrecy extended beyond technical aspects to include basic mission details. The crew couldn't reveal even fundamental facts about their experience for 5 years after the mission. This extraordinary level of secrecy protected the sophisticated radar imaging surveillance satellite payload, considered vital to national security intelligence operations. The compartmentalization of information would later be identified as a contributing factor to NASA's organizational problems in the Columbia Accident Investigation Board's report. Without open discussion of a near disaster, safety lessons couldn't be fully integrated into NASA's culture. Only those with appropriate security clearances knew what actually happened to Atlantis. For decades, the true story remained hidden. While certain modifications were implemented across the shuttle fleet, the context behind these changes remained obscured for most NASA employees. This created a situation where technicians implemented critical safety improvements without understanding their urgency. The first public photographs showing the extent of the damage weren't released until long after the mission, when classification began to expire. The secrecy persisted partly because the reconnaissance satellite deployed represented technology whose capabilities remained sensitive long after the satellite itself had been replaced. Additionally, the near loss raised uncomfortable questions about risk assessment. NASA had proceeded with reentry despite knowing about significant damage, a decision that proved fortunate but could have ended in disaster. This decision-making process, especially in a classified military mission context, created precedents agencies preferred to keep from public scrutiny. The parallels between STS-27 and the later Columbia disaster are striking. Both involved thermal protection damage during launch, disagreements between engineers and management about damage severity, and difficult decisions about uncertain risks. The key difference was outcome. Atlantis survived, while Columbia did not. These parallels make the long classification of STS-27 all the more significant, as earlier transparency might have influenced later safety decisions. From military secrets to civilian technology, despite the classification barriers separating military and civilian domains, the technology developed for these covert missions didn't remain confined to government vaults. The revolutionary innovations born from Cold War space espionage fundamentally shaped modern technology in ways few could have imagined at the time. The intense competition in space during the Cold War, driven primarily by military reconnaissance needs, created a technological pressure cooker. Military necessities demanded solutions to complex problems: how to photograph enemy installations from space with incredible detail, how to precisely locate targets anywhere on Earth, how to process massive amounts of visual data quickly. These challenges required breakthrough innovations that would eventually transform civilian life. The smartphone in your pocket contains multiple technologies that trace their lineage directly back to classified space operations. What was once the exclusive domain of intelligence agencies now serves as the lens in your pocket, the navigation system in your car, and the processing power in your hand. This transformation represents one of the most significant technology transfers from military to civilian applications in modern history. Consider digital imaging technology. The sophisticated cameras in today's smartphones evolved from systems originally designed for spy satellites. The KH-7 Gambit, KH-8 Gambit 3, and KH-9 hexagon reconnaissance satellites drove the development of advanced imaging technologies that could capture incredibly detailed photographs from space. These systems photographed Soviet military installations with enough resolution to identify specific vehicles and equipment. The KH-9 hexagon carried an astonishing 60 miles of high-resolution photographic film. Its twin optical bar panoramic mirror cameras rotated to capture sweeping views of terrain below. Engineers pioneered image processing techniques to enhance these photographs, extract information, and analyze visual data. Those same fundamental technologies now power the camera in your smartphone, allowing you to capture high-quality images with a device that fits in your pocket. This technological evolution occurred through a careful declassification process, with military innovations gradually finding their way into commercial applications. The image processing algorithms developed for analyzing reconnaissance imagery now enhance your smartphone photos automatically, improving clarity and extracting visual information in real time. Perhaps the most transformative example is the Global Positioning System. GPS began as a strictly military asset, designed during the Cold War for precise navigation and targeting. The ability to pinpoint locations anywhere on Earth with extreme precision provided a strategic advantage for military operations. Today, nearly 6 billion users worldwide rely on GPS technology through their smartphones, vehicles, and other devices. The surveillance tool of yesterday has become the foundation for countless civilian applications, for navigation apps that guide you through unfamiliar cities to fitness trackers that map your running routes. GPS has become so deeply integrated into daily life that most users never consider its origins as a military positioning system for reconnaissance and weapon targeting. The sophisticated image processing technology pioneered for reconnaissance satellites has applications far beyond photography. The algorithms developed to enhance satellite imagery now help doctors analyze X-rays, MRIs, and other diagnostic imagery with greater accuracy. Hierarchical image segmentation, HSG, software, originally developed by NASA for satellite imagery analysis, is now used by Bartron Medical Imaging as a sophisticated diagnostic tool that enhances medical imagery. Military space programs also accelerated civilian technology development through the miniaturization of electronic components. The constraints of space missions demanded smaller, lighter, and more power-efficient electronics. Engineers working on classified reconnaissance satellites had to solve complex problems of fitting advanced technologies into compact packages that could operate in the harsh environment of space. This push for miniaturization directly contributed to the development of smaller, more powerful electronic components in consumer devices. The microprocessors, memory chips, and batteries in modern devices all benefited from innovations originally driven by military space requirements. The transfer of these technologies from classified military applications to everyday consumer products required collaboration between government agencies, research institutions, and private industry. Patents were licensed, research findings were published, and former military engineers brought their expertise to commercial enterprises. The digital revolution that brought us smartphones, online mapping, ubiquitous photography, and global connectivity builds directly on foundations established by classified military space programs. Technologies originally designed to spy on adversaries now connect families, navigate vehicles, capture precious memories, and power countless aspects of modern life. This transformation embodies a remarkable irony. Systems designed for warfare and espionage during one of history's most tense geopolitical standoffs ultimately produce technologies that connect humanity in unprecedented ways. The same innovations that once separated adversaries now bring people together through communication technologies that span the globe. The next time you use your smartphone to navigate to a new location or take a high-resolution photograph, you're benefiting from technologies that trace their lineage directly to those classified space shuttle missions. The Cold War's peaceful dividend now residing in the palm of your hand. The continuing secrets of military space. Those smartphone technologies we rely on daily represent just the declassified tip of a vast military space iceberg. While civilian applications provide tangible benefits from yesterday's classified operations, today's military space activities operate at levels of sophistication that would astonish most people. The capabilities deployed in orbit right now likely make Cold War missions look primitive by comparison. The establishment of the U.S. Space Force in 2019 marked a watershed moment in military space operations. This formal recognition of space as a distinct warfighting domain elevated it alongside traditional theaters like land, sea, air, and cyberspace. The USSF's creation signaled that America's military leadership views space as an environment where conflicts will inevitably unfold, requiring specialized personnel, technologies, and strategic approaches. What was once hidden behind the Iron Curtain of Cold War secrecy has evolved into today's invisible battlefield among the stars. Like chess masters who've moved from wooden pieces to quantum computing, military strategists have transformed their approach to space dominance. This evolution becomes clear when examining vehicles like the X-37B, an unmanned space plane operating in extreme secrecy. Unlike the shuttle program, with its dual civilian-military identity, the X-37B makes no pretense about its classified nature. This reusable robotic craft has completed multiple missions, remaining in orbit for periods exceeding 900 days, far longer than any shuttle mission. The Air Force and Space Force provide only vague descriptions of its activities, typically referring to testing technologies and conducting experiments, but experts believe its capabilities include surveillance, deployment of small satellites, and testing of anti-satellite technologies. The X-37B represents a new paradigm in military space operations. Its ability to maneuver in orbit, change altitude, and return precisely to Earth gives military planners options that fixed satellites cannot match. Most significantly, it can deploy payloads into orbit and then recover them, allowing for testing advanced technologies without leaving them permanently vulnerable to adversary observation. Modern reconnaissance satellites have evolved dramatically beyond the KH-11 ONYX system deployed during STS-27. Today's classified imaging platforms incorporate multispectral sensors capturing visual, infrared, ultraviolet, and radar data simultaneously. These satellites employ electronic intelligence, ELINT, and signals intelligence, SIGINT, payloads monitoring communications and radar emissions with unprecedented precision. Artificial intelligence now processes the vast quantities of data collected, detecting anomalies, predicting object behavior, and providing real-time intelligence. These systems autonomously identify changes in adversary deployments, detect camouflaged equipment, and predict potential threats before they materialize. Military competition in space has intensified, with the United States, China, and Russia racing to secure advantages in this ultimate high ground. Military strategists recognize that disabling an adversary's space-based infrastructure could effectively blind and paralyze their forces, making space control a prerequisite for victory in major conflicts. This competition has driven development of sophisticated anti-satellite weapons designed to neutralize adversary capabilities in orbit. These range from ground-based missiles to directed energy weapons and electronic warfare systems. Russia's 2021 ASAT test, which created a dangerous debris field, highlighted the real-world risks these capabilities present. Space-based infrastructure is inherently vulnerable. Satellites follow predictable orbits with limited defensive capabilities. Yet, disrupting these systems carries enormous risks, potentially creating cascading debris fields that could render entire orbital regions unusable for decades. One significant change from the shuttle era is the proliferation of commercial satellite imagery, making military space activities increasingly difficult to conceal. Companies now operate constellations of high-resolution satellites that can detect military launch preparations and track movements. This transparency has forced military space planners to adapt their operational security measures. The U.S. military has responded by developing proliferated satellite constellations of hundreds of smaller satellites in multiple orbits. These provide resilience. Individual satellite losses don't compromise the overall system's effectiveness. They're more difficult to attack comprehensively, can be deployed rapidly, and allow for regular technology updates. Modern military operations rely on seamless connectivity between space-based systems and assets across all domains. This integration enables unprecedented coordination, with space systems providing targeting data for precision strikes, communications for deployed forces, and navigation for unmanned systems. Nuclear space propulsion and power systems may revolutionize military capabilities, offering dramatic increases in efficiency and mission duration. These technologies could enable unprecedented maneuverability for military spacecraft, allowing rapid orbit changes and previously impossible missions. Advanced manufacturing techniques are similarly transformative. Additive manufacturing has already improved spacecraft design with more complex, lighter components. Future applications could include in-orbit fabrication of replacement parts or entire spacecraft components, extending mission durations and providing unmatched operational flexibility. What remains unseen may be even more significant. Military analysts believe classified space programs likely include capabilities for proximity operations, on-orbit servicing of classified assets, and systems designed to temporarily disable adversary satellites without creating debris. The strategic ambiguity surrounding these programs serves military purposes. When potential adversaries cannot be certain of capabilities, they must prepare for a wider range of contingencies. Space exploration has always occupied a unique position at the intersection of scientific discovery and geopolitical power. The Space Shuttle program exemplified this duality, serving as both a vessel of human curiosity and an instrument of military strategy. Missions like STS-27 highlight how deeply intertwined these purposes became during the Cold War, with scientific advancements often masking intelligence operations. As we witness new space powers emerging, this fundamental tension persists. The astronauts who ventured into orbit, aware their missions served multiple purposes, shaped our modern world in profound ways, both visible